Welcome into Emerald and Lilywhite, the official YouTube channel of Seattle Spurs. This is episode 30, the big 3-0. We are rocking and rolling. I'm your host, Scott. You can find me at Scott G. Bird. With me today, to start at least, we may have a few more joining, is Keagan McMurray at Keagan McMurray. Keagan, what's going on?
How's it going, everybody? Happy holidays. Good to be here. Bad to be a Spurs fan.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're maybe saying we're here so we don't get fined at this point as Spurs fans, right? But we're here to keep things moving. And actually with us now, he just joined. We said we may have one joining a little bit late. Is Robbie at Robbie_Light, Robbie Light on Twitter. We're going to keep going through that function until that person on Twitter gives that handle up. But Robbie, what's up, man?
Not too much. Just came back from getting stretched out, so I feel great. Shout out to Stretch Lab in Seattle. It's a place where you just lay down like you're a professional athlete and they stretch you out for an hour. It's amazing.
Dude, I need that. I do. I do a nightly stretching routine, and it's exhausting at times. And I would love for someone to do that for me.
I could use that after every time Spurs play a team with a low block.
Yeah, pretty much.
Spurs definitely cause tension, and that can be relieved by Stretch Labs in Seattle. So free plug for Stretch Labs. If you want to sponsor the pod, hit us up.
Mm-hmm.
You know where to find Robbie. Just remember, if it's on Twitter, there's no underscore. If you need to hit Robbie up, but yeah, let's get into it, guys. There's plenty to talk about. We're going to go chronologically here. We're going to talk briefly about Liverpool, and then we're going to jump to Nottingham Forest. Keagan and I were talking off the air. At this point, the Liverpool match is pretty inconsequential, as you said, Keagan. I think that's well put, but we'll cover that briefly. We're going to talk injuries. We're going to talk big picture. A lot going on at the club, but let's start with that Liverpool match. And Keagan, I'll kick it over to you. We know how it finished, 6-3 in favor of Liverpool. Just an absolute goal fest, an entertaining match, we could say. But what's your big takeaways from that one?
You know what? My big takeaway is to not have a big takeaway, I think. I think if anything, like I actually was watching that game and was like finally like a little bit impressed with some of our attacking moves, but obviously you put an 18-year-old center mid at center back against three of the best attackers in the world, or even just a team that has 7 attackers that would probably start for our team right now. It's not going to end well. And I think that Ange just kind of refused to adjust our style for that game, and that showed in the scoreline. But yeah, I've kind of tried to forget it, and I've done well so far, so I don't have a ton to say about that match.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I think, and Robbie, I want to get your thoughts here too. But briefly, I'll just say I agree with everything you're saying. I think knowing we have a couple matches against them in the form of a home and away semifinal. Maybe there's something to be said about not showing the adjustments or the cards at this point that one could make, against who I think is the best team in Europe, right? But I think going into this one, we all expected this to be a bit of a free hit. But yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Robbie. What are your big takeaways? And I know you and I talked briefly prior to this match, right? But we haven't spoken since it kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and I would add to, like, there were some tweets I saw that were basically discussing, like, this is, and it kind of going to that same point of, like, you can't have it either way. You got to pick one. And It's like, how many other managers before this, or if people are lamenting for Pochettino or for Mourinho or for someone that would adjust like this, it was like, we'd be down 2-0 and we'd have a back 5 and we wouldn't score a goal the rest of the game. But the final score would be 3-0 Liverpool. So would you rather have this where it's exciting? And there was definitely multiple 10-minute stretches where it was like, hey, we're within 1. What's going on? Are we figuring it out? Like, the whole match was exciting for the most part. Half the goals were errors that were just stupid, or that were very clear. We have our 5th string center back out there, or whatever. So yeah, I don't have any takeaways, but I'm sure this is a deeper argument later in the pod of just, what do you want? Do you want to be a super boring Nottingham Forest Nuno's team, or do you want to be an exciting team that even when you lose, it's still exciting? So yeah, I don't know. It was exciting, I think, and yeah, we all knew going into that there was no chance we were going to win that game. But then there was 3 different moments where it was like, we're within 1. What's going to happen? And then of course we didn't. But I thought it was exciting. So whatever. It's over.
Yeah, I mean, nobody expected Spurs to win this match, myself included, right? I would have been thrilled if we did, but as I said earlier, I think Liverpool are probably the best team in the world at the moment. Arne Slot has, I think, elevated them to another level. They're super crisp, they're super clean. They execute everything to perfection. That the way they played under Klopp was just as effective and exciting to watch, right? But I think that, again, there's just an element of perfection to Arne Slot and what he does from the standpoint of, maybe I'll say, cohesion that we didn't see under Klopp. Liverpool is a very, very, very good side, and Spurs just aren't quite there yet. So I don't think it's surprising at all. And, I'll say it. I think it's, again, this is kind of reading down the list, and we'll get to this more, but I think what we saw is kind of what Spurs fans have been asking for, right? Just high-flying football. And you never want to concede 6 goals, but when you have an Archie Gray who isn't a center back and is 18 years old, and Radu Dragusin who just frankly isn't up to it at this point, right? I don't think you can expect much more. So anyways, we move on. I think everybody's kind of over the Liverpool result. Let's talk Nottingham Forest, because I think that one carries more consequence. To go back to Keagan's words earlier, I think this one has a few more layers to pull back and more of a conversation to be had. So I'll go right back to you, Keagan. What are your takeaways from what you saw transpire yesterday?
My takeaways are 2 things. One is fatigue, and one is the fact that Nottingham Forest plays an exact style of football that is our kryptonite.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's our kryptonite, I think, comes down to our wingers. And I think I would love to have a discussion about Sonny at some point on the pod, maybe today. But I think that the creative hub of Man City or Arsenal, when they're playing a team with a low block, is not their midfielders, because when you're a low block, the midfield is extremely compact. The creative hub is you swing the ball around twice, that horseshoe style, and then you create or force a one-on-one situation with your winger and their fullback, and that winger takes that man on, figures out a way to put a cross in, or does something that's relatively dangerous. And while Brennan, actually, I was relatively impressed with him yesterday. I thought he got himself in good positions. Like, Brennan doesn't really do that, and Sonny definitely did not do that yesterday. We swing the ball around in a horseshoe there's just no purpose to it. It's just to go backwards again. And we only can seem to score when we either take a long shot or try to force it through the middle and get a lucky bounce, or score off a set piece, which we don't do those things very well. I think, and then to go back to fatigue, I think that that stood out to me a ton, because when you are an attacker and you've played 5 games, you have this mental fatigue that comes on too. You just kind of run out of ideas, or run out of like motivation and kind of drive to make those decisions, and the decisions come back to just kind of keeping the ball or going backwards, or you're not just physically tired, you become mentally tired. And I think that was extremely evident yesterday. So fatigue and lack of creative wingers is what it came down to for me, which I don't think is necessarily on Ange. I think that Ange, like he said in his post-match press conference, he knew that game was going to be a game with very few chances for us. And I think that the goal they scored was highly preventable. And I think we can talk about that a little bit later. But we just didn't put away our chances. Brennan had one that was saved. He also had a brilliant little touch around the corner that he really should have slotted away. He was right in front of the goal. And that could have been the difference. And I think that was the difference. But Nottingham Forest, I think around the Prem and on Twitter, it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a big upset. Like, Nottingham Forest beat Spurs and like Wolves beat Man United yesterday. Like, I don't think those are upsets. Those teams are just better than us right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an upset. Nottingham Forest is just better than us. They have a better, more effective system, and it showed. So.
Yep. I mean, they sit 3rd in the table for a reason, and we're talking 17 matches. We're almost at the halfway point, and when you're in 3rd place at the halfway point, it's not by accident, right? That they're a good side. I agree with everything you're saying. I think tactically we have a lot of work to do, and I don't put that all on Ange. I put that more so on the board, right? The squad needs to continue to be overhauled in a way that is conducive to the way that we want to play football. And we hired Ange because there's a certain way we want to play football, and we need to allow him to be able to do that. I said in the chat yesterday that I'm growing tired of this, but I'm not saying I'm growing tired of Ange at all. I'm just growing tired of the situation. And I know it's a pain point that was, I didn't expect us to be in 11th, but I expected pain points, right? And I have in my little tag here, Spurs out. It's totally a joke, but it's kind of a knock at the Levy out, or sorry, the Ange out folks and the Levy out folks. It's just, there's nothing we can do but ride this out. And we're certainly not going anywhere as Spurs fans. But I think tactically what I'm seeing more than anything is anything that's good from us this season has come from transitions in the middle of the park. I think that's where we really started to find goals. And when you play these low blocks, you're not going to find those transitions in the middle of the park. You have to be players in one-on-one situations, and we frankly can't do that. I'm happy to talk about Sonny, and we'll do that a little bit further down the list here, right, as we talk big picture. But I haven't seen Sonny do anything with the ball at his feet but stand still and wait for people to move around him pretty much all season, right? And that's a very simplistic take, but that's just cut and dry what I'm seeing when he receives the ball in the final third, right? So Sonny's not up to it. And frankly, Sonny has always been good when he can find space behind the defenders. He's never been a guy to break down a low block off the flank. There's a reason his two highest marks from a goal contribution standpoint come under Mourinho and Conte, because we sat back and looked to break, right? I think it's very specific as to why those seasons were good for him. And then the only other times he thrives is in Big Six matches, and Big Six teams get forward and leave space behind their back line, right? So I don't think what we're seeing from Sonny is surprising. I think it's what we've always seen from Sonny. He can also poach, if we want to say that, but I also don't think he's a number 9, right? And the number 9 needs to be able to poach, but it's a lot more than that. So unfortunately, I think, again, we'll get to this, but Sonny may not be the right fit for the way that we're trying to play at times. But it's all down to transition, and we're not able to transition against these teams. And then the way that, you already got to it, but the way that we allow ourselves to be broken on, some of that's probably on Ange Postecoglou. I'm not going to say it's not, right? And the way that we're choosing to play. But I also think with the correct personnel or the preferred personnel across the back line, those things probably aren't happening either, right? So, but all you have to do to beat us is you have to win the ball in the final third. You have to switch the play and play a ball down the line, and you're pretty much in every single time, right? And that's what we saw yesterday from Longa. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. Robbie, what do you take away from what you saw yesterday?
Yeah, no, I think all of the above. The one thing that I was just ruminating on that I remember hearing, and I think this was someone ran with this on Twitter too, but one of the announcers at one point, which I know we don't like anyway, made the comment that like, oh, Nuno's getting the best that he can from these players, from this squad or whatever, and that's kind of where the discourse has changed on Ange now, is all of the fans are like, he needs to be getting the best out of what he has. And that's totally the opposite point. Like that is not what we hired him for. That is totally going to kill any and all progress. Forest is in third. They're one of the laziest, weakest teams I've ever watched. They stink, but they win because they win 1-0. Like their goal differential is like +3 or something for the season. Do you want to watch that? I don't want to watch that for an entire season. For Forest, it's going to be the greatest season in their history of this millennium, I guess. But it's like, why? That's not what we wanted. We wanted the Spurs way, the Tottenham way, the Ange way, whatever. I'm at the point of the season now where I just don't even want to talk about Ange anymore. Like it's just not. There's no productive conversations. I don't think that can happen on the tactics of Ange Postecoglou, because he's playing with spare parts the entire year. So even if we had the best play, we won't know because we don't have the healthy players, and it doesn't seem like we're ever going to have the healthy players.
It's not just spare parts too; it's fatigued spare parts.
Right.
He's playing the same backup 11 over and over again twice a week for the past month and a half.
Right, and this ran through my mind too. Like the amount of times this year I have completely forgotten that Wilson Odobert even exists is crazy. Like he's I think he's out for the entire year, right? Like as far as we're aware, like he's just he really messed up his hamstring and he's just done for the year. He's someone
winger signing too.
Like he would be someone that we desperately this whole beating a man discussion. He was what we signed for that. But to be fair, we only signed one, or I guess technically we signed Timo, but we all know how we feel about that. And I think Ange knows how he feels about that too. But Yeah, like it's just the injury thing is just insane. And I think there's a million reasons behind it. Like obviously this is the other argument of Ange needs to get more out of what he has of like, this is why people are getting injured because we're making them play this style, or when we don't have enough players, we don't have enough bodies to rest people enough to play this style nonstop. But yeah, I'm of the mind of I just don't think there's any value of discussing Ange's tactics anymore. I know Max would definitely be going heavy on the tactics right now of Ange, but for me, I'm just like, nothing's going to change. He's not going to change. We know he's not going to change. So we need to accept that and understand the blame is elsewhere. The responsibility is elsewhere. It's the board, it's the players, it's the, whatever you want to call it. But he's never done anything but told us who exactly he is and what he wants to do. So I'm not sure we can be mad at him. Like he's been 100% honest the entire time he's been here about what he wants and what he's trying to do. So that's just, my Twitter feed is just poison for the last month now of just people wanting Ange out, fire Ange, all this stuff. So I'm just at the point where I'm like, there's no productive conversation to be had at this point because we're never going to know unless we actually start putting players out there or getting people healthy, which again, there's probably 55 variables as to why we're not healthy, but he's doing what he said he was going to do. And I'm just going to let him keep doing that until insanity takes us all, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's all really well said. And it starts to get into the bigger picture stuff, which I almost jumped right in, but we'll hold off for just a few more minutes here. But it is what people ask for. It's the way that we've taught him to play football. I think the only, I don't want to say pushback, but the only things that I would point out here are, I don't think there's a correlation between the way that we tax our defenders from the system and the fact that every one of them is injured. I don't think it's pure coincidence that that's the case, right? Without a doubt, there's no other position in our system that's taxed more heavily than the back line. And fatigue leads to injuries, as Keagan has pointed out. Fatigue is a huge piece of this, right? And as you said, it's not only physical fatigue, but mental fatigue leads to injuries. When you're not executing with your body perfectly, it leads to things happening. I think that's part of what we saw with Radu. We'll get to that, but Radu looks to be no longer available. We have 0 registered center backs available for a match against Wolves. So I think some of that can maybe fall on Ange Postecoglou. And again, I'm nowhere near thinking Ange is the problem. I'm just pointing out that these things, we can't ignore them just because we're all in favor of Ange, right? And then the other thing I'll point out is sometimes in interviews when Ange says, I'm not going to flip a switch and change the way that we play, I agree. But I think there are people who aren't asking for a complete revolution in the way that he wants to play football, but maybe just slight adjustments or slight tweaks, such as looking to see out a lead. Liverpool does it really well. They go up 2-0 and then they play defensive football, and that's okay too, right? I think there's a delicate balance between results and the way we want to play. I think my 12 years as a Spurs fan, math is hard for me sometimes, 12, 13 years as a Spurs fan has shown me that we want results, then we want to play a certain way, but no, hold on, we want results, and then we want to play a certain way, and as one of you said earlier, we can't have both, right? Maybe we can. We want both, but it can't always be that way. At the very least, it takes time before you can have both of those things. It can't just happen right away, and I think that's exactly what we're going through. So yeah, just a lot going on in the club, but I think the overarching theme is that we need to be patient. But at the same time, it's on somebody, and we're going to get to that. Let's talk injuries before we get to big picture. I want to leave plenty of time for the big picture because I do think that's going to take some time, right? For sure. But there's a lot of injuries right now. We know Van de Ven's injured. We know Romero's injured. We know Vicario's injured. We know Odebear's injured. We know Richarlison's injured. We know Mikey Moore's still out with this lingering illness. It sounds like he's maybe back to health, but needs some time. Ben Davies has faced a setback. From what we're understanding, we don't quite know much about that. Another 2 months, Robbie says in the chat. That's pretty insane. I didn't know that. I just seen there was a setback. And then it looks like Radu Dragusin is potentially out this weekend too. We don't have any information as to what happened, but we know he came off.
Ange just said in his presser that he picked up a knock on his ankle and he just didn't feel like he could go on, but he could potentially be ready for this weekend. But
okay.
Like up in the air. It's a question of it.
Okay. Yeah, it's we hope for the best, but as we look through that list, good chunk of them are defenders. Like we said, we don't have a registered center back. We assume that Archie Gray is going to be playing center back, and who he's paired with if Roddy is not able to go remains to be seen. Potentially Alfie Dorrington could get his first start in a Spurs kit. He is an available center back. I think there's people who have thrown out potentially Bentancur can play center back, or potentially Basuma can play center back. I don't agree with that in any way, shape, or form, right? And if either of you think that's a good option, I'm all for hearing why that is. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Archie Gray and Alfie Dorrington as a center back pairing, which is, we'll say, concerning. You guys have any thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'll add to that, I saw this on Twitter, and again, Twitter, I'm a fan of a lot of sports, and the European soccer community is the one that blows me away of how many rumors are out there, how many conflicting rumors are out there. Things are never match up. Like those screenshots I sent saying Spurs going to do a lot of business in January. Spurs not doing any business in January. Like, you never know. But I saw a couple reports this morning saying that the team feels good about how good Archie Gray is playing at center back, and it's going to lessen their need to sign one in January because they like Archie Gray's progress. So we may be stuck with that for the rest of the season. Complicating matters, obviously. I've also seen a ton of information on the internet about Luka Vuskovic, or whatever his name is, just destroying whatever league he's in. He scored 9 goals as a center back this year already. So people are suggesting, obviously, too, we don't want to block his development by signing someone that's going to be here next year and take away his playing time. So might be Archie Gray the rest of the year. So we'll see.
That's classic Spurs, man. And that's also classic rumor mill. But that's potentially classic Spurs too. I did see a rumor that we've inquired and potentially even made a pre-window bid for Ben Godfrey from Atalanta, who was at Everton last year, if I'm not mistaken. Went to Atalanta. Atalanta is fantastic, but Godfrey's seen very minimal minutes for the Bergamo side. And so that would be quite underwhelming in my opinion, but he's a human being. Yeah, exactly. He can play center back, so that's a positive, I guess, if you will. But I would really like to see us put ourselves in a position to not only bolster the ranks, but push for competition. I mean, big clubs, and again, I think Spurs are a quote-unquote big club, but we'll say clubs that win things consistently. They don't care if they have Romero and Van de Ven. They sign players who compete and push Romero and Van de Ven for that starting position, right? And we all hope that Radu could potentially do that. Again, it doesn't look to be that that's the case, and he's still young, but we not only need to bolster the ranks, I think we need guys that could compete and potentially, have guys like Romero and Van der Ven sweating for their position. That's what breeds championships, in my opinion. So a lot to do. Super glad the window's coming up. Ultimately, in my opinion, though, what has to happen is we have to continue to give Ange Postecoglou the pieces that he needs to be successful. Otherwise, what are we doing, right? We know very well that what's happening right now can't continue to happen. It's not sustainable, right? And if we don't bring in more pieces to give Ange Postecoglou the chance to be successful, then he will eventually be sacked, and then we'll hire another manager, and it will be the same thing over again. So you guys are probably seeing where I sit on the big picture stuff and where I believe the fault lies, right? And it's not with the manager, in my opinion. But yeah, let's talk big picture. We're going to preview Wolves too, but we'll do that after big picture chat at the end. I'll kick it over to you, Keagan, and I'll just ask you, assuming that you don't feel that sacking Ange Postecoglou is the answer. And I'm not talking about right now when I ask this question, right? But long term, what has to change in order for this to work out?
Yeah, I have 2 things actually. I don't think that sacking Ange is the most productive way forward. It just, who else out there are you going to hire that is going to make a difference or play differently than Ange? It's going to be more productive. Like the most productive way forward is to see out Ange's project as long as you possibly can. But I think that there's 2 things that need to change. One thing is that I think that right now the board, their strategy is to do the absolute bare minimum of what is required to put out a productive and successful product on the pitch. I think Liverpool is a great example of doing more than the bare minimum. About 2 years ago, when when their midfield was kind of aging and Fernandinho and Thiago Alcantara were kind of fizzling out. They were like, in the summer, they were like, Liverpool needs a new midfield. In the same summer, they went out and signed Gravenberch, McAllister, and Szoboszlai. 3 top quality Premier League midfielders. And now they have one of the best midfields in the world. When we were like, we need a new center back pairing, or we need new center backs, we have Eric Dyer and Clement Longley and all those bums. We signed Romero and then fiddled with it for a while. And then we're like, this maybe is working. Romero's pretty good. And then a couple windows later, we signed Van de Ven. And now we're kind of like, well, we have 2 good ones. And so maybe we'll sign Rado Dragusin as a potential backup. And it's been slow. It hasn't been, there's been no real initiative taken. It's just been the bare minimum. And the same thing happened with like Pochettino when he was in his prime. And then we hit that summer and they signed 0 players that summer. And then Poch had to deal with a bare bones squad and was sacked. And so I think to move forward, what has to happen is that the board has to not do the absolute bare minimum. They have to take real initiative and sign players that are like, no, maybe we have a player in this position that's productive, but we need to push this player. We need to have a backup for this player that's as good, if not better than that player. So yeah, that's my first thing. My second thing is that when Spurs have been their most successful with players like Dele and Sonny and Kane and Eriksen, what happened is we got lucky with cheap signings and we had players from our academy that were successful. That has to happen. We need players like Jamie Donnelly, like Alfie Devine, like Alfie Dorrington. We need a couple of those players to show up and show up big in the next 3 or 4 years, or it's just not going to work. And we need players like Wilson Odobert and Radu Dragusin, who are like relatively cheap kind of signing players with potential. We need one of them or 2 of them to really work out if it's going to work out, because the board has not shown that they are willing to sign established and high quality players. They're shown that they're willing to take risks on younger players and hope that academy players work out. And if that doesn't work out, then we're not going to be any good. And that's kind of what it comes down to.
Well said. I can completely agree with both of these things that you're saying. I want to bring Max in quickly. Max has joined us. Max at Going Limbs, my co-host. Max, we're in the middle of the big picture conversation, and you may be able to bring some fire to this conversation amongst 3 guys who are, pretty I guess congruent, we could say, with the way that we feel about things. But let's get your take on the big picture, man. Myself and Keagan both feel that it lies more at the feet of the board right now. And I don't even say Levy necessarily as the sole person when I say that, right? He's a heavy influence, but the board, we haven't gotten to Robbie yet. But where do you think? I guess maybe the better question is same thing I asked Keagan. What needs to change or what needs to happen in order for this to work out under Ange?
Yeah, I think that the main thing for me, I'm sure Keagan mentioned this as well. It's like we have to spend, like Keagan said, but we have to spend money on players that fit Ange's system. Our recruitment has to be better. And I think like one person that like the blame game has been happening for like a month now. Like, oh, who's at fault? Is it Ange? Is it players? Is it board? One person I feel like has kind of not gotten as much stick as he should have is Johan Lange, who his recruitment up to this point, I guess we only have like a couple window, or we only have one window under his belt, but he really didn't assess the needs of the squad properly. I think we can all see that, like the gaps in the squad. I don't know if it was because we weren't willing to spend on players that he thought were good enough, and if that's just a board problem, but for him to not identify players that we liked that were cheaper as like a backup left backup, another backup center back, and even more wingers, I think that's a problem. And then our recruitment in the past under Ange, I don't know if it was Ange specifically wanting these players or what the deal was, but like a signing like Dragusin, like he's clearly not meant to play our system. Like he doesn't fit our system at all. He's terrible in possession. He would be great on a team like Forest, which we just lost to, but he can't really move the ball that well. And then you get quotes from like Liverpool players saying like, we're trying to like press Dragusin, and like we love when he has the ball. Like we can't have our third choice center back like being singled out as like a sacrificial lamb for the other team. Like that's just not good enough. And then a player like Brennan Johnson, again, I don't know if Ange had a part to play in that. It was one of our bigger signings at the beginning of his tenure. I just don't think he fits either. Keagan was highlighting in the group chat, like we need someone who can take on his man. And Brennan Johnson, for as good as ball striking and like some technical ability, like his dribbling is not good enough. And we can't have him and Son on the pitch at the same time when they're doing the exact same thing. And we have no creativity there, especially in a game like against Forest, where I think we would have much benefited from probably what I would have done is dropped Son and then had Kulu and Brennan on the wings and Madison there. But we just need players that fit the mold of Ange's team. So I don't care about the price tag on the players, because I think if they can play Ange's system correctly, they're going to be effective with Ange, because I think he's a really good manager. So if you give him the players he wants, they don't always have to be the big names. But I feel like thus far we've just seen Lange give us youngsters, and then the recruitment early on in Ange's tenure, I think we were a little bit unsure of what exact style he is playing. But now that we know what style he's playing, we need to recruit well in fullback, winger, in the 6th position. And I think we did nail it with Solanke up top. So I'll give him credit for that. And our obviously Romero and Van de Ven. I think all 3 of those are perfect for Ange's system, but we need to see more starting in January, hopefully.
Was Dragusin a panic buy, in your opinion? And that was last January, right?
I don't think it was a panic buy. I think we needed a backup center back at the time. Bayern was in on him, which maybe, I don't know, like upped his value a little bit. Yeah. But I just think he wasn't the right profile. Like I don't know if that's a panic thing, or there was just no center backs available, or we just didn't scout him well at all, which I think might be a combination of the 3. But we needed a center back. He's just not like what we needed at all, because he's terrible in possession, and that's where we spend the majority of our time. So
I really think that Ange wanted Dragusin. I think that I remember an interview where Ange said that part of the reason that he thinks that he does fit the system is his bravery on the ball. Like he loves to drive forward. He loves to try and play passes through that break lines. But like clearly, like that hasn't fully developed yet, and he's still young. And I can see like you can see his physical and defensive prowess. But I think Ange like saw the potential to develop him into a player that could be really effective on the ball, but that clearly hasn't worked out. And so I don't think that that's really on the scouting really, and more just on like, we just kind of got unlucky on that one. And we did really need a center back. We'd sold Sanchez and had literally 2 registered center backs on our team at that point. So we had to buy a center back. But so I think it's a mix of kind of like panic and a mix of like development not really working out, and a mix of like give him a little more time maybe.
Yeah, he's 21. Yeah, maybe 22
it's
now.
It's just tough with like technically, like it's just so hard to get better technically, like as opposed to like physically. But yeah, we'll see. Too. I'm not writing him out. I'm not saying we should get rid of him. Like he'd be a good backup, but like in the state that we're in, we definitely need more right now.
Robbie, I want to come to you quick. We've talked about Ange a little bit, and I think there's more of a conversation to have there. We talked about Levy, or the board at least, right, and what needs to happen. I want to talk about the fans a little bit, and you know, you're kind of our resident fan liaison here at Emerald and Lilywhite. But you know, my question is, what part do the fans play in the mess that is Tottenham Hotspur right now? Because I don't think it's a 0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you guys all at least know of or maybe follow Paul O'Keefe on Twitter. But a lot of people claim he's Daniel Levy's mouthpiece, or he's someone that sort of puts things out there that Daniel Levy wants to have put out in the public. But he had some thread like a month ago basically suggesting that like whenever the fans start turning against Levy is when he fires the manager, because there's nothing else he can do. Like he's never going to fire himself. And like every time we've seen the chants at the stadium, he's then fired the manager within a month or so. But yeah, and I think another thing that is this morning, this one blew my mind. There's people on Twitter this morning calling for Pochettino to come back, and I'm just like, are you serious? Like, like I can't believe that people have reached that point where they're like, he's gonna save us. Like, unbelievable.
Hands off our other manager. Hands off our other manager is all that I'll say.
Yeah. So and I think the Nottingham Forest game was important because again, he was only our manager for 10 games or whatever, but seeing Nuno at another team playing the world's most boring soccer you could imagine playing. And then, they're in the top 3, but like, that's not what, like, would we be happy with that? I don't think there's any pleasing the fans. Would we be happy if we were in 4th and we had a 2-goal differential? Like, we're winning every game 1-0. Would we be happy as fans? Probably not. We'd be pissed off that we're not scoring more goals or we're not playing the Tottenham way. So like, there doesn't seem to be any formula or result. Like the only result is like I said in the chat, we have to win the quadruple. We have to have a plus 50 goal differential, and we have to, never lose a game in the Prem. Like, is that ever going to happen for Tottenham Hotspur in the history of the universe? Probably not ever. Honestly, if I'm being honest, I think did Liverpool do it once or what was it? United did it where they had a couple draws but no losses. That was once 25 years ago. But yeah, I don't know. The goalpost is forever moving with fans, it seems like with the board, with internally. It doesn't matter what happens. We're going to be pissed off about something. We're going to be mad about something. And this is not excusing what's going on now. I just think people run away with things because they want to run away with things at this point. And I've been hinting at this for months and months. And I just feel like we need to be more realistic about Tottenham Hotspur as a club, at their history. They've never been great. And if they were, it was 50 years ago. Like they've never been Liverpool ever. Like maybe in the 60s, I guess, but like 60 years ago, the average Tottenham finish is like 6th over the last 30 years. So yes, we've had moments of glory, but this club is not like, again, we're allowed to be upset and critique things, but if we adjust how we see this club, we can maybe have more productive opinions on things or directions to go. I think, in my opinion, the most productive conversation is the board right now, or like why we're not spending enough money to buy players that are in their prime. That's where it needs to go. Max, you missed this earlier, but I was basically like, I'm at the point where I think any discussion of Ange Postecoglou's tactics or anything is basically pointless. There's nothing to talk about anymore. He's never going to change. He's going to do what he's going to do. He's been 1000% honest in that since he's been here. So no matter how many reporters whine to him, how many fans whine to him, he's never going to change. And if that's the case, the board needs to give him what he needs to do his style. So I'm firmly passing the buck. Other people are allowed to criticize Ange. I'm not saying not criticize him, but there's no discussion I think that can be had that will ever cause him to change. So we need to kind of pass the blame to the next person, and probably the most relevant person, which is the board, which is Levy, which is Munn, which is Lang. I saw a Twitter thread the other day that brought up, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts because I don't know too much about the rest of the world outside the Premier League, but they're like, no one at Tottenham has ever come out and given a statement. It all falls on Ange. No one from the board, no Lang, no Munn, no one was like, hey, this is what we want to do, or we're trying. Hey, fans, listen, we're doing our best. Like, no one has said a word. It's just Ange is the mouthpiece, and that's it. And that's probably why he's getting all of the hate, all of the, whatever. And again, maybe other clubs act the same way. I feel like I've noticed in the past, like Liverpool, FSG has at least made statements about stuff in the past or come out and said stuff, but it just seems like
FSG sucks.
Yeah, they, of course. But like, if everything is going to, if everyone that's making these decisions that are the bad decisions continue to hide behind a wall and never say a word, that should tell us something too, I think. But
yeah, I want to get Keagan in on this quick because Keagan, I know you got a hard stop, so I want to get your thoughts on what he's talking about right now. Why does the board hide behind a veil at Tottenham Hotspur compared to other clubs?
I think that's really interesting, and to be honest, I'm not totally sure. Is that the case that other clubs owners and like business owners like make statements consistently? Or
I wouldn't say it's consistent by any means, but it happens. It happens, and I think maybe the way I should have phrased the question for a club, that seems to be always in peril and turmoil. Why is nothing ever portrayed to the fan base? Because I think at times all the fans are asking
Didn't we have
for
one?
I know Levy came out one time.
Come on, you Spurs, Daniel. Do you remember that?
Yeah, exactly. Boys Daniel, and it was honestly, it really felt like, and I wish I had the transcript in front of me.
But we just trolled him for it.
Totally. Well, and he passed the buck around a lot in that interview too, right? Where he talked about his passion for the club and all of that. I do think some of what has to be remembered when the fans take issue with the board, which I do, is that Daniel Levy does not own Tottenham Hotspur, right? ENIC owns Tottenham Hotspur. Daniel Levy was appointed the chairman by his employer, which is ENIC, right? And so Daniel Levy answers to ENIC. And his most important job function, in my opinion, is a profit and loss sheet, a P&L sheet, right? That is what ENIC is most interested in. They bought Tottenham Hotspur to earn money, not to win football matches, in my opinion. Now I'm talking ENIC, right? Levy's a fan. He's a lifelong Tottenham Hotspur fan. I truly believe that Daniel Levy wants Tottenham Hotspur to win things, but I think that he answers to a profit and loss sheet that rolls up to ENIC. And so I think that has to be considered when we slander Levy as fans, which, again, we tend to do. I also think, to Robbie's point, we are the most insufferable fan base you'll find in European football. And I think that's because I firmly believe it's because we are, like, if you tier European clubs, there's like world-class tier, then like elite tier. Maybe I'm making all this up, right? But I think like we're at the top of the elite tier and can't get to the next level. And we're maybe one of the clubs who's been so close over and over and can't get there. And I think that's why we're so unsufferable. Like, if we were used to finishing 12th place every season, we just keep on watching football and finishing 12th place, right? But we've had that taste or a nibble and can't quite get the full meal, right? And I think that's why we just absolutely suck as fans here at Spurs. But yeah, I think my main point is Levy does not make the final decisions when it comes to these things. He answers to people.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to how reactionary we are as fans. And I know that's kind of a common talking point, but I think it's very true. Like when you look at like after the Southampton game, it's like, oh my gosh, like Radu and Archie, like maybe they're like actually the center back pairing of the future. Like you're seeing tweets like that, and it's like these guys are amazing, and we have amazing players. And then we beat United, and you're like, wow, like we're really like Ange, even in this injury crisis, is coaching wins, and then we lose on one more game, and it's like, or then we lose to Liverpool, and it's like everything is the world's ending. Like we're horrible. Archie Grace should never play center back again, and Radu's like not good enough. And like the reality is like Ange's system has the potential to win games and has the potential to lose games badly. And like the goal obviously is to win more games than you lose, and that comes down to building something over a long period of time that wins things more than you lose things. But like right now, we're just kind of in that rebuild kind of purgatory, and like you're going to win games and you're going to lose games. And I think the fact that we're so reactionary that it's really just like this, but we're acting like it's like this. And like, I just don't think that's really the case. And I think that patience is what's required. And obviously, like, I'm all in on being very, very critical of the board and critical where criticism needs to be placed. But I think that the reality is like patience is maybe the most productive action that we can have as a fan base, at least in this moment. So.
Yeah, well said. I'm going to throw one question out to all of you, so feel free to hop in with this. But if Ange didn't have the hot start in those first 10 matches last season, everything that's transpired since those first 10 matches, if that didn't happen and those first 10 matches were parallel to what we've seen since then, would we all be saying, get this guy the fuck out?
He would have been out. He would have been out last year. He would have been out last spring. There would be nothing to like even show like this is what it could be. Like he would have had to have like that run at some point during his career, like where we're like the best team in the league, and be like, this is Ange ball, like this is what it could be. If he didn't have that, that's the one thing I'm still clinging to with this guy. Like if he didn't have that, I'm just seeing us hold 6 to Liverpool like at home. I don't know. Like, I think he would have been gone. I think he would have been gone a long time ago.
Keagan, Robbie, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, like, I think I'll talk about this forever and ever, but like, and Ange has brought it up several times too, and I feel like it was this ace up his sleeve that he didn't want to have to lean on. But it's like the team he inherited was junk. Like, it was we finished what, 7th or 8th that year, and then Harry Kane left. And then Harry Kane left. It's like, the patience was always going to be required. And that first summer when we lost Harry Kane, it wasn't like, oh, Harry's gone the next day. Boom, Dom Solanke, 12 a.m. the next morning. It took a year for us to buy Dom Solanke. And obviously he needs time to settle or figure out the system too. But yeah, like, again, I think I brought up like the spreadsheets I was sharing in the chat of like the averages of like Tottenham's finishing position. Like, holy shit, man, we finished 4th once in the last, 6 seasons now or something. Like, and it was that one year where we had the new Conte bump, basically. It's like, it's been 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. What was last year? Last year was 5th, I guess, which was a trending upward. So like, even though we were like, wow, that season kind of ended on a lull, it was still a forward progress because we finished 3 spots higher than we did the year before, and we got European football. And now this year, again, even if this Premier League season finishes 12th, like, we're in a semifinal of a Carabao Cup. Again, I don't personally find that impressive, but a lot of people talk about that. Like, well, we made a final, we made a semifinal. Like, that's progress. That's definitely progress. I don't think I want us to win. I would hope I want us to win, feel like, wow, that's progress. But we also didn't even make a semifinal in a cup for like 7 years or something. It's been forever. And we haven't won a cup, obviously, in 13 plus years or whatever it is. So even though that this is a steaming hot pile garbage of a Premier League season, I still feel like there's been some progress. Like, I think there's, we are moving forward. We are middling. We are average. But yeah, then we blow out teams 4-0, 5-0. We beat top 6 teams. Like, again, we would love that roller coaster, as Keagan was saying, to be a little more flat. I think that's bringing out the worst in the fan base, is this, like, we do a podcast, we just won 2 games. We do the next podcast, we just lost 2 games. We do a podcast, we just won 2 games. Our last 5 pods have been after back-to-back wins or back-to-back losses, I think. So it's like, it's bringing out the worst in the fan base. But I don't know. I see progress still.
Do you think there's anything to say to the fact that at this point last season we had scored 2 less goals, conceded 2 less goals, and we're sitting in 5th? And at this point in the season, we've scored 2 more goals, conceded 2 more goals, and are sitting in 11th. Like, is there anything to say that maybe we're just like extremely unlucky with our results and like should be better?
We're just piling on goals when we're already winning, though. Like, we win like 5-0 and just like boost our goal difference.
Yeah,
and we lose only all our games by 1 goal. Like,
and other than Liverpool, like, we've lost our games by 1 goal. Is that not like evidence of like we could be very good?
Yeah, and I also think,
but I feel like every time we're losing, like recently at least, it feels like the most feeble effort at like trying to equalize. Like, I can't think of one chance in the second half against Forest where I was like, oh, we're actually going to equalize. That was like pathetic, to be honest. But yeah.
I also and this is hard to be objective about as a Tottenham fan, but I feel like my experience with the Tottenham fan base, we're one of the worst fan bases at like taking a step back and seeing the bigger picture, because 80% of the Premier League is garbage this year. Even the top 4, most of them are bad, or like they're not. Arsenal's not thrilling to watch. Nottingham Forest certainly not thrilling to watch. Like, other than Chelsea and Liverpool, no one is thrilling to watch this year. And I'm not using that as a scapegoat for Tottenham, but like, this is also just a really terrible year. And I think we've had this conversation before. A lot of sports across the world are having the same situation this year, where every team is 500, every team is mid, every team is weird, and it all kind of coincides too. I think different conversation, but the amount of games being played every year is more games. And, Chelsea's figuring it out. It seems like if we're going to play 100 games a year, we need to have 100 players on our squad. So Tottenham needs to, hey, if we're going to be in Europe, if we're going to be in these semifinals, if we're going to be in international cups, whatever, a Super League, like, you need to have 2 full starting 11s. Like, you need to start having that kind of money. And obviously teams like Liverpool do that. City does that. They're obviously kind of on a downturn right now, but like, if Tottenham ever really wants to be a big boy, we got to have 22 players that are starting 11 quality. And right now, I think everyone in this chat, we were like, do we even have 11 that are starting 11 quality? So a lot needs to be done.
And I think a lot of those have to come from the academy too. Like, that's what Liverpool has done. and it's worked to perfection. This year we haven't like utilized our academy at all, mainly like Lancashire a little bit, but he's been sick for like 7 months. So I think that'll come good next year a lot more. So that'll be exciting. And then the last thing is I think it's just tough because like we know that this league right now is not good. And like a lot of these teams we can beat and aren't good. And then we're still like 10 points back of fourth. And like that Nottingham Forest team is nowhere, like we're so much better than them. Like I'm confident that we can like that we're just better. And they're 11 points clear of us in third. And it's just, I don't know. It's just disappointing. It's disappointing, but
yeah. I want to go back to Keegan's question, talking about the points the goals for and against and the league table differentiation. I do think that Ange was very much, faces pressure because he was a product of his own success in those first 10 matches, because after those first 10 matches, we absolutely fell off a cliff. Our form last season was really, really poor after those first 10 matches. Without that run, we probably would have finished somewhere between 8th and 11th if I had to make a guess, right, last season. And so I think the 5th place finish was very much inflated by the fact that the league had never seen the chaos that is Ange Postecoglou ball before, right, and really didn't know how to counter it. And I don't mean counterattacking football when I say that, but come up against that and find a way to play against it, right? So, and I'm not saying that Ange is the problem. I'm just saying I think because of those first 10 matches, we lost sight of the challenges that we face as an organization, like you guys talked about, Kane leaving and the abysmal squad that we had at the time that Kane left. Ange had a massive project in front of him. And I think without those first 10 matches, people would be a little bit more patient and understanding in the sense that this is going to take some time. But because of those first 10 matches, everybody thought we were ready to win the league, and we were nowhere close to it. I really think we just caught the league off guard with a style of football that had really never been seen by anybody in the league.
I mean, the reason that we have been so good in the past is that Harry Kane has scored 25 plus goals a season, and Sonny has scored 15 to 25 goals a season. Like even if you have a mid-table level squad surrounding those two players, you're going to finish relatively high up in the table because you have two of the best players in Premier League history. Now, one of those is playing for Bayern Munich, and one of those players is just old and declining. And we don't have that player anymore. And so now it's like we're trying to rebuild a squad that was a mid-table level squad without our 2-star players. And that's just, you're going to finish 11th. Like that's just the case. And I think I'm kind of coming to terms with that. It's like we had a mid-table squad with Harry Kane and Sonny. And now we have a mid-table squad without Harry Kane, without Sonny.
Yep. And I think the hardest part for me to stomach, I completely agree with everything you're saying, is from 2015 to 2017, we had the chance to become one of the best squads on the continent, without a doubt, if we would have done things correctly. We didn't, and we've just been absolutely floundering ever since then. And that falls at the board. And I'm not going to say only Daniel Levy. That falls at Enoch. That falls at Levy. That falls at whoever makes those final decisions, right? That's where this club lost its way, and we've been recovering ever since. We found ourselves in a Champions League final. Should never have been there, if we really want to call it what it is, right? We had Sissoko and Winks as a double pivot, and no disrespect to either of them, but
Winks.
For sure. And Winks is he's a Premier League footballer. I certainly was never even remotely close to that, so I'm not here to talk shit about either of those guys. And I'm a huge Sissoko fan. I think the dude worked his tail off for the club. He really did. But we were very lucky to be in that Champions League final, and it was honestly Luka Mora, his absolute magic and luck, we could say, right, that got us there too, and that Ajax tie. But I really think since 2017 we haven't been worth a shit, and we're kind of still living in that era. All right, well, the last question I'll ask on big picture, and then we're going to talk about Wolves, is I think we all get the sense that Ange Postecoglou is the right guy, but I think we have to remain unbiased as a podcast and ask the question, is there any fault that lies with Ange Postecoglou here? And maybe, Max, I can come to you because you might be able to get this conversation going for us.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you can't hold 6 to Liverpool at home. Like, you got to fucking do something. Like, you got to change your tactics at some point. And I'm not saying do that when we're already, like, what did we go 3-0 down or were we 2-0 down to Liverpool? I can't remember.
It was 2-1 down, and then we ended up being 5-1.
It was 2-1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2-1.
Okay, bet. Yeah, so I'm not saying, like, adjust when you're already down 4-1, but you got to know the type of team you're playing against and like what their goals and aspirations for the league. When you're playing against Liverpool at home, they're gunning for the league title. We can't play the style that we always want to, or else we're going to get 6 goals scored on us, and that's fucking embarrassing. So I think that for the most part, and just devoid of blame right now because of just the state of the squad and everything that's happening. But you've got to adjust. Like, there's got to be some adjustment. I know he's stubborn. I know he adjusts sometimes. We can't hold 6 to Liverpool at home. We just can't. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but that's just unacceptable to me. That just feels like giving up. Like, it felt like Ange didn't care anymore, that once we were down 3-4-1, he was like, I don't care. I'm not going to, like, do anything. I'm not going to make changes. Like, just have at it, dude. Just keep scoring, Arnie. Thanks. Cheers. And I'll be on my way. And then backing that performance up with a fucking shit attacking performance against Nottingham Forest is just not inspiring. And I think Scott said something similar in the group chat. I don't think Ange is completely, like, blameless, because even with the state of our squad, and we're solely playing Prem games at this moment. Like, I know we had Carabao Cup, like, 1 game, but we haven't played Europa League for a bit. We're mainly playing Prem games. We cannot fucking lose every game, right? Like, we can't keep losing every game. Even with a depleted squad, we should be able to win one of Forest and Liverpool, hopefully the Forest game. I think when you know you have Liverpool, it's always tough, but when we're getting smacked 6-1, and then getting some garbage time goals at the end, I think we can start prepping for Forest and hopefully get a win there. So now we have to win the Wolves game. I know that some people want to say, who cares about the Premier League? I still care a little bit. I think it's unacceptable to be 11th in the Premier League because we're better than that, even with a depleted squad. So I think it's up to Ange to get the most out of these players. I think the squad that started yesterday is better than Nottingham Forest, and I think they should have won that game. So I would like to see Ange change a bit, adjust his tactics a bit for the game, because obviously Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, polar opposites in style, and both those styles just completely beat us, and we were overmatched, and we didn't deserve to win either game. So if you can't break down a low block and you can't handle a team that plays in possession, then what are you meant to handle? What style is the one suited for you? So just would like to see that from Ange. And also, it doesn't give me much confidence that we're making the Carabao Cup final when we allow 6 goals to the team that we're playing in the next round. And we have to play them at Anfield. So, yeah.
Keagan, is Ange putting his principles before results? And I'm not fishing for an answer. I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think.
Well, maybe for the time being a little bit. Because I think he, especially in Prem games, I think he might be. But, like, I actually have, like, a kind of an opposite take to Max. I think that Ange did the right thing in sticking to our principles against Liverpool, and, like, we just lost that game because we don't have as good of players as they do. But I think that he needed to adjust in the Nottingham Forest game, where like our strategy pretty much was Kulusevski needs to dribble through the entire team and, like, pass the ball into the back of the net. Like, Solanke finally got his first, like, headed cross to his head in, like, the 91st minute that game. And, like, I think that Ange needs to realize Nottingham, like, and the adjustment needs to be made of like, we're not going to be able to play through and win the ball high at the pitch because they just boot it every time and counterattack and sit 11 men behind the ball. And so that's where our tactics have to adjust, I think. And I think that's where Ange might be to blame. It's like, you need to just put balls in the box and take long shots and play gritty for that game and not try to play the beautiful gung-ho high press, like attacking football. That's where it's like, yeah, we need to score off a set piece or score off a long shot or just put 15 balls in the box in the span of 10 minutes from the 80th minute to 90th minute and hope something happens. And like, that didn't feel like that was the case to me. So I think he was right in leaving his tactics against Liverpool, because I think that we're going to have to do that when our squad is healthy in order to go head to head with them. And we can't sit back against Liverpool. But against Nottingham Forest, like, I think that's where the tactic needs to adjust a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about earlier, anything good, and Max, I don't think you were on yet when we were talking about this, but anything good that happens for us from an attacking standpoint is because we transition out of the midfield. We don't counter, right? But we win transitions in the midfield and we break quickly. Against these low blocks, that's never going to be an option for us. We're not presented with opportunities to transition out of the midfield. So what do? And I think that's where I agree with you 100%, Keagan, is Ange has to figure that out. He has to figure out how to score goals when we can't break in transition out of the midfield. Again, personnel goes into that. But if you look on paper, I understand Archie Gray's 18 and I understand Radu is getting up to speed. But if you look at Spence, Udogie, Bentaker, Sarr, Madison, Kulusevski, Solanke, Johnson, Son, and I know that Madison didn't start, right? But he saw minutes, and all those guys are significantly better footballers than anyone Nottingham Forest had on the field, in my opinion, right? They're all
Gibbs White's pretty good.
Say that again?
I said Gibbs White's pretty good.
I agree, and I'd take him at Spurs in a heartbeat. Obviously, Big Chris Wood's having a heck of a season too, right? There's some talent.
Imagine if we signed him. There would be so much outrage.
But no, I mean, my point is we are more talented than them, and that's on Ange to figure out a way to make it work, right? Now, I do think, and Robbie, I want to get your thoughts on this, right? I think when we look at Liverpool, we look at the league, we look at the way that Ange continues to play his style of football. The metaphor that I have at top of mind right now is say Spurs have like a broken spine, and I don't mean a broken spine in the footballing sense, right? But they have a significant injury to their body. I think Ange maybe sees adjusting his tactics and not building up to what we need to be as like a Novocaine injection rather than continuing to get healthy, right? And so I understand why he wants to continue to work and take out every opportunity to get the squad where it needs to be, right? So maybe my question is, at what point do you say we can't keep free falling? We have to find a way to put Band-Aids on or put patches on, right? Do we get to that point, or do we just keep free falling until we're no longer free falling?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I think people on the internet are starting to suss this out too. And I'm kind of starting to think too, like at what point is a manager going to hold the board over the balcony by their ankles? Like, we need someone that's like, I'm just going to play balls out and hurt every player on this damn squad until we have no one left. And then you have to buy somebody. Like, there has to be a sacrificial lamb at some point. Maybe it's going to be Ange. I don't know. But if we just keep firing managers over and over because they can't get the best out of the players we have, we're never going to have good players. We're just going to be like, here's another garbage group of players. Go do something with them. Go park the bus with them. Go win 1-0, whatever. And I don't know. This is my biggest fear, and I've said this multiple times on this podcast. We're gonna fire him, and he's gonna go somewhere else who gives them everything he wants, and he's gonna be the best manager in the world. And we're gonna look at ourselves and be like, "Wow, what did we do? We messed that up." Mourinho, the only team he never won a trophy for, Tottenham. Just like all those things where it's like
he would have won.
Yeah, he probably would have won 1-0. Probably would have won 1-0 against City. But yeah, it's just like somebody needs to and I think Ange doesn't care. I think Ange is part of his personality. He's ready to push the buttons. He's ready to see how far he can take this before before the board does something about it. And if they don't, well, he has the best excuse in the world. So I don't think he doesn't. There's nothing he's afraid of, I don't think. And yeah, to go back quickly to the Liverpool thing, like I think I'm on Keagan's side too. Of like, is a 5-1 loss better than a 6-3 loss? Like if we would have just parked up shop and was like, no, we're not even going to try anymore. I don't really have an answer, to be honest, but is it more exciting that we actually started scoring goals and coming back and figuring it out? Or is it like, well, we got whooped and we just held the ball for the next 65 minutes?
And that's kind of, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's kind of where I think like it was maybe okay to do what we did against Liverpool in the league. But I'll tell you right now, if we go into a cup semifinal, and
where goal differential matters in that regard,
like if we expect Archie Gray and Roger Dragusin to be two defenders by themselves against Salah Diaz and Jota or Gakpo or whoever it is, right? I'm saying, Ange, what in the fuck are you doing, bud? Like, that's only going to go one way every single time. And so I'll expect adjustments in the Carabao Cup semifinal. I also think Ange had a unique opportunity against Liverpool on Sunday, to not only keep any potential changes or cards close to the chest, but also just get a feel for how things looked against Liverpool in that situation. And again, I think not good, but I think that gives him the opportunity to determine what adjustments need to be made, and in my opinion, a much more meaningful match on January 8th.
So I agree with that. I just think like if we try to do the pressing thing against them, we're gonna get destroyed. Like they're just so much better than us. Like they are going to destroy, like Trent, Gravenberch, Van Dijk. They are going to kill us if we try and press them, and then we don't have the one-on-one defense to handle any of their attack, like you said. So I'm curious to see what Ange does, because I think if it's go for the pressing, I just think that's going to be a disaster.
Well, I'm just thinking, I'm having trauma in my head already of like, let's all prepare ourselves mentally for the morning when we announce for the first game back, Van de Ven and Romero are coming back for that Liverpool game. No warm up, no game time before that. And then they both, of course, will get injured again because they're sprinting down the pitch every time they're getting beat by someone to go stop a breakaway. So if either they don't play at all in that first leg, or we need to give them the game before, because if we set them in cold, they're both going to get hurt again. I know they will.
And it reminds me of my pro clubs team on FIFA. I play the 6 for my pro clubs team, and we just turn the ball over on the wing over and over and over. And my whole life is just chasing back and trying to stop the break when 3 guys are running at me. And that's Romero and Van de Ven, their life in a nutshell, man. I feel for those guys.
Dude, Van de Ven against Liverpool, though, is like the most valuable asset we could have.
Yes,
so hopefully
100%. I mean, Romero and Van de Ven pose a challenge for Salah Diaz and Gakpo, if we want to call that their preferred front 3 right now, right? So it's going to be interesting. I think there's every reason to think we can go get to the final. If we look at last Sunday, it doesn't feel that way, but I think they can be two very different things.
I just hate playing against Anfield, or I hate playing at Anfield second leg. Like that's just disastrous.
Yeah, agreed.
Even prime Barcelona can't do that.
Yep. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. Remains to be seen. Let's move on from the big picture stuff, and let's just briefly preview Wolves. Keagan, I know you got to bounce, so thanks for the time, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Take it easy. Have a good weekend. Let's talk Wolves briefly, guys. There's not a whole lot to talk about here. We've talked ad nauseum about what we can expect from Spurs. If we look at Wolves, they're coming off a big win against Man United. Obviously, Man United's in thicker mud than we are right now, so you don't put a ton of stock into that. But they did beat Leicester the match before Man United, so they're 2 wins on the bounce. And they just brought in Vitor Pereira as their manager after sacking Gary. What's his name? After sacking Gary
O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. After sacking Gary O'Neill, thank you. Vitor Pereira has managed Porto. He's managed Olympiacos. He's managed Fenerbahce. And he most recently was in Saudi Arabia, but before that, he managed Corinthians and Flamengo in the Brazilian Serie A. So he's managed quite a few reputable organizations. I think it's very easy to forget about the level of quality in South America, especially in Brazil, right? So he's managed some good clubs, and new manager bounce probably more than anything. But we're up against a team who's playing pretty well, and we're not playing so well ourselves. Max, what do you expect from this one?
Well, Dragusin's injured, so
yeah,
we don't have center backs. Like we genuinely don't have center backs. any center backs. Davies is not going to be back. Like, there was a chance that he could have. It looks like he's not going to be, at least at this moment. Hopefully that can change.
Robbie said. 2 months he's out.
2 months for Davies.
That's not a specific number, but it's basically sounded like a significant setback is what the wording sounded like. So it's
I was hearing like maybe a month from today. Like, I don't know. It's going to be a minute. Then obviously, like, Dragisin's now hurt, which is disastrous. I don't know. I think Alfie Dorrington, for me, has to start. Yeah. I don't want to start Basuma and Archie Gray. Like, why wouldn't you just give – if we're just at the point where the league is just, like, freestyling at this point, just give Alfie Dorrington a shot. Like, see what he can do in the Prem against, like, a relegation squad. Like, this is a team, like, that he would be playing if he was on a championship loan next year. So – just in my opinion, give him a shot. It's going to be bad though. I think we can pull out a win. I think for my sanity, like, I would really love a win. Because if we go like 0 for 4, like, we have a stretch of 4 Prem games right now before our cup match. And if we go 0 for 4, because we got Newcastle up next, which I doubt we win, that would be a problem for, like, I don't know. You just can't. If we have only games, like, we have a period where we're only focused on the Prem, we gotta, like, try in the Prem. So I'm going to go with, like, a 2-1 win maybe, or maybe a 3-2. But I'm just concerned. I have no idea what our defense is going to look like. Jed Spence, red card, is suspended as well. So we know who the fullbacks will be. Then Archie Gray, I assume, will start, and hopefully Dorrington alongside of him. And then as for the rest of the squad, I don't know. It's probably going to be the usual suspects, Bentancur, Sarr, Madison. I think Son needs a rest. Like, just give him a rest. He's played a lot of games, so I think that really dips his form. I think he's best when he's playing once a week, so that's what I like for Sonny.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Dorrington has to go. I do not trust Basuma with no one behind him in any way, shape, or form at all. I think that would be a disaster waiting to happen. People have said Bentancur as well. No, thank you. I think it's got to be Gray and Dorrington for sure. But yeah, it's a crisis of all crises, you could say, from a defensive perspective for Tottenham. Robbie, what about you, man? What are you expecting from this match?
Well, I was just looking at some stats as we speak. Wolves have won 4 games this year, and 2 of them happened in the last 7 days or whatever. So they've won 4 games. They've given up 40 goals. That is most in the Premier League. So please, Lord, can we score some goals against them? If we don't score a couple goals, that would be so depressing. The other piece I was just looking at, and again, I'm not excusing anything or leaning back, but going back to the discussion about how the Premier League is so average this year, Tottenham's had a disastrous season. We are 2 wins out of 5th. Yeah, like it's just like Newcastle has 29 points. We have 23. We would be ahead of them in goal differential, especially if we beat them in the next, whatever. We're in 5th place. It's crazy that how terrible this has been to watch. We're still somehow only 2 wins out of a European place. But yeah, I think I'm terrified. It looks like Wolves are yet again a team that has a lot of speed. They always seem to be a really fast team. So there's going to be a breakaway goal, I can imagine. So that's going to be depressing. But yeah, I said this about Nottingham Forest, but holy crap, I hope we win. There's nothing inspiring about this team other than the last 2 games they played.
Bit of a bogey team for Spurs, though.
Yeah.
Can't remember the last time we beat them, to be honest.
Well, what was it? They had Traore, and then they had Neto, and then who's the Cunha or whatever his name is. Like every year, there's some dude that's just good. There's one guy that's fast. Or what was that? The last time we played Wolves, maybe it wasn't the last time. We lost 2-1, and didn't Neto have 2 breakaway goals in the last 10 minutes of the game or something? Like we were winning 1-0.
It was João Gomez. Yeah. João Gomez.
He had two identical goals, just breezed past our entire defensive line and scored.
Oh yeah, and then we had one where they scored in the 93rd, then the 97th.
Yeah,
and beat us. They beat us 1-0 after that on Adama 82nd. I remember that game. Yeah, the last time we beat them was August 2022. I hadn't started college yet. Kane won. Wolves 0.
Kane won, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. If I'm Ange, I am looking to press more so in the midfield than up high. I'm cooling off the press in the final third, allowing them to progress the ball a little. I'm not saying allowing like here walk on through, right? But just cooling the press a little bit and then pressing super hard in the middle of the park. I think that's the way that we can beat them. But I think if we come out like we did against Forest, we're in trouble. That's all I'll say. And I think if it's crazy to be talking about Wolves like there's a good chance that they can beat us in this match, but frankly, I think there is. So it's on Ange, I think, to figure out how to not let that happen. And the big picture is not on Ange, but figuring out how to beat Wolves with what you have is on Ange Postecoglou. And I think, there's ways to do that, and I hope that's what we see. But Wolves is good. I know Cunha is somebody that actually we're linked to right now. It's reported that we've shown interest in Matheus Cunha, and I'm sure he'd be interested in getting out of Wolves, who are going to be fighting a relegation battle when everything's said and done, right? But they're a good side, and we don't have a registered center back available at the club, so it's going to be a dicey one without a doubt. But we'll hope for the best. If we lose this one, things start to just get really bleak, and there's already a ton of pressure piled on not only Ange but the club, and a loss to Wolves, who are again just an awful team, would not help the cause there. So we need a good result here. Another 5-0 like we saw against Southampton would be super helpful. But that's gonna do it for us. Anything else you guys want to chat about before we wrap up?
Luka Vucevic bicycle kick. For Westerlo, he's a center back, by the way. Josh Keeley, Leyton Orient, 8 straight shutouts. Imagine if we had that here. I'm not saying he would change that, but that's incredible. I think that's all I got.
That is your for those who are counting, that is your Lone Watch, brought to you by Finney Ridge's Wits End and down in Puyallup, Cascades and Rainier Growlers. We appreciate our homes so much. Thank them for everything they do for us. Make sure you get down to one of those 3 places if you're available. If you've listened to the show, you know where they are by now, right? But get down, watch Spurs with some fellow Seattle Spurs fans, tip your bartender as well. We appreciate everybody's time today. Most importantly, we appreciate Seattle Spurs for the platform that they give us to continue to build the Spurs presence in Seattle. You can find me at Scotchy Bird. You can find Max at Going Limbs. You can find Robbie at Robbie_Light and Robbie Light on Twitter. At this point, it's a bit Robbie, and I'm going to keep saying it right. But y'all know where to find us. You can find Seattle Spurs at Seattle Spurs on all platforms. You can find us at Lilywhite on all platforms. Make sure you sign up for us through the Seattle Spurs Gmail account at seattlespurs@gmail.com. You'll get all kinds of match viewing information, Spurs information. It really force-fed everything that you need. If you sign up for that Gmail account, you won't be unhappy that you did. Also, as Seattle prepares for the Club World Cup and eventually the World Cup, right, as a host city for both of these things, it's going to be a wonderful time to make sure that you're signed up for that Seattle Spurs Gmail account, as we'll feed you all kinds of stuff around those 2 competitions and potentially – no promises, but even how to get involved, with the World Cup as a potential volunteer and all of that, right? So get signed up. But for myself, for Max, for Robbie, for Keagan, who you can find at Keagan McMurray, for everybody at Emerald Lilywhite, for everybody at Seattle Spurs, we appreciate the time. And as always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.